Hey, today we're going to talk about epidural headaches. Okay, so now I've done a lot of natural births. You know, my first was with an epidural because we just couldn't, after 17 hours, get this, baby progressed, get my labor progressed to the point where we were actually having a baby. So I ended up getting an epidural with the first one. But my second, third, fourth, and fifth children were all natural births, natural with no, no medication or epidurals or anything. However, my fifth baby, the labor was very difficult. It was very fast. It was very strong. It was extremely painful. There was no breaks in between contractions. And I was traumatized. I really was. I came out of the birth saying, like, I don't want to have another baby. I was so traumatized from it, the whole thing. And in fact, that was actually my biggest break between my kids. My kids are all 1.5 to 2 years apart. And between baby 5 and 6, there was actually 3 years because I was so traumatized. At some point, I realized, I'm like, what am I doing? If I want to have more children, maybe, I shouldn't be so traumatized in the labor, and maybe I should go for an epidural. And it was actually the first time I considered doing epidurals because I wanted to take an epidural, not just because, my labor wouldn't progress. But, I thought about it. I discussed with some friends and with my husband, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to go into this labor saying I want an epidural. And I did. I got pregnant. I went in to the hospital when I went into labor, and I was literally dancing. I was like, "Can I have it yet? Can I have it yet?" I was dancing into the hospital asking, "Can I have the epidural?" And they were like, interesting lady. But I got my epidural, and the labor progressed. We, easily, and I had the baby. And I was actually very happy that I was able to say, you know what, this is what I need. And I didn't always have to be super mom. And sometimes I could say, you know what, I need an epidural, and that's okay. That's all right. It's important that we realize what we need. And just because, everybody around us is doing something different, that's okay. If this is what I need, this is what I'm going to get for myself. And I was happy I did that. So the same thing really repeated itself when I got to labor number 7, which was just less than 2 years later. I also came dancing into that hospital again. It was actually the same doctor and the same anesthesiologist. It was really funny. And I was like, "Can I have it yet? Can I have it yet?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we know this lady, we know her." But something different happened in this labor that wasn't like the other 2 times that I'd had an epidural. They, you curl up into a ball, and they tape up your back, and they, insert, get the needle, and they have to play around till they get the exact right spot. But when they did, and they shot in the medicine, something different happened that had never happened to me before. I had like this feeling of like this cool fluid, like going right up my back and hitting the back of my neck. And I was like, "Ooh, what was that?" And I explained it to them, and they're like, "No, you must be feeling something. It's you imagined it." And I was like, "No, I really." And I explained it to them. They're like, "No, you imagined it." So, the labor was long and drawn out, and it was not a simple matter, that particular labor. But in the end, when they took out the epidural, what happened was I got a headache. And the headache started to grow, and it got worse and worse. And when I explained this to them, they said, "Oh, you haven't slept all night, and you're tired, and you're probably dehydrated. Take a drink, go to sleep for the night." And I was like, no, this is not just a regular headache. This is like the only way I could explain it was I had once, when I was a teenager, had viral meningitis. Now, bacterial meningitis is lethal. Viral meningitis is serious, but it's not lethal. And it's like taking your head and smashing it into the wall. It's beyond headache. You can't function. You really can't function. There's the only way I could explain it was like having meningitis. This headache was so severe and so bad that I couldn't function. The only difference was that when you have meningitis, there's no relief. There's no relief. It goes on, whether you sit up, you stand up, you lie down, whatever you do, there's no relief. But with this particular headache, it was so interesting that when I lay down in bed, the headache actually disappeared, which I couldn't figure out. I'm like, that's so interesting. So I was like, okay, I'll just lie down, I won't move. But as soon as I would get up to try to whether take care of the baby or go to the bathroom, I literally couldn't function. I was like going to fall over from pain. And interesting that the hospital staff really, I I have to say, they didn't believe me. They kept saying that you're just tired and dehydrated. It wasn't until literally 24 hours later that they finally sent one of the anesthesiologists back into my room, and he asked me a bunch of questions. And he asked me to describe the headache. And I said, well, it goes away when I lie down. So he said, okay, bingo, that is an epidural headache. So if you want to know whether you have an epidural headache, that is the main sign. If it goes away when you lie down. So when I would lie down, the headache would just go away. So he explained to me that the way that, to deal with it is either you can just wait it out, and sometimes it takes a month or two till it goes away. And I was like, no. I can function. I have other kids. I have a baby. I have to be a mother. I can't just sit around in a hospital for a month, So they said, so then what the procedure that they do is called a blood patch. And a blood patch is when they, they take your arm and they take out blood from your own arm, and then they go into your back and they inject it in the same place where they did the epidural. They inject that blood into your back to go up your spine. What I understood that an epidural headache is that when they puncture your back and they go into, to get the nerves. What ends up happening is they puncture slightly, a little bit more than they need to. And what ends up happening is that some of the fluid from your brain stem, it gets let out, and that vacuum of not having all that fluid there creates a headache. So what they're doing is that they're filling up that space from the fluid that was released. They're filling up that space with your own blood. And that is what takes away the headache. The problem that I had was that they told me that my platelet levels were low. They had done blood work on me, and they said your platelet levels are low and therefore we can't do the blood patch. So I was like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? And they're like, nothing, we'll just have to wait. So I sat around in the hospital another day. Now this is the day that I'm supposed to be discharged already. And I'm still waiting around, and they took my blood again, and they're like, okay, it's borderline to the point where we'll do it. So they came back in, and there was one person working on my arm, another one on my back, and they injected it back into my back, and then they told me I have to lie down and be completely still. I'm not allowed to move for a half hour to 40 minutes. So I did that. They really were very clear that you cannot move. So I took that very seriously. I lay down, I did not move. No answering phones, no nothing. And at the end of that, it was interesting. They sent in one anesthesiologist who was brand new. She was young and sweet, full of energy. She came running into the room saying, okay, you're all done now. Okay, come on. And she was yanking me out of bed. I'm like, no, everything hurts. Don't move me. So, I tried sitting up, and I had the most interesting feeling. It was like the headache had gone away, but there was all this nerve pain in my legs. Like when I tried to move at all, I had this shooting pain down my nerves all the way down my legs, like the lower part of my back and down my legs. So it was almost like they had cured my head, but they sent it the other direction. And I actually couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was like, that's really scary, and tried describing it to them. They're like, no, that's not, doesn't come from a blood patch. There's no such thing. And again, they wouldn't believe me. And then they actually told me, okay, it's time for you to go home, discharged, goodbye. And I was like, what? So I called my doctor's office. It was daytime hours. I called my doctor's office and I said, can I speak to my doctor? And they said, oh, we're sorry, he's seeing patients right now. And so then I started crying on the phone. It's the only way you can get the doctor on the phone. They had the doctor on the phone within 20 seconds, I think. So he heard my whole story, and I said, I can't go home. I can't move. I'm in pain and everything. And he said, well, the problem's the insurance. So I ended up having to call my insurance from the hospital to explain them the situation, and then my doctor, spoke to the hospital staff, and I ended up staying an extra day in the hospital. But when I did leave the next day, I was still in pain. It was like a week went by, and I was still in pain with this. Every time I would move, roll over in bed or try to get up, I would have crazy pain going down my legs, down the nerves, like a nerve shock. And I was really scared. I was like, wow, is this, this is gonna be forever like this, So, and they told me that this is not natural for a blood patch, just does not happen every time. But I'm telling you because it could happen, and I want to tell you the outcome of it. What ended up happening was I went to the doctor, and I ended up speaking to another doctor who was one of my daughter's friend's father or something, and he said to me, it sounds to me like what happened was they poked that needle in your back a lot of times. When they first originally put in the epidural, they had to play around a lot, they didn't get it in right, and then they had to do the blood patch, again they had to play around, and it sounds like you have a bit of like scarring right there at the spot where they did the epidural, and that is creating some inflammation, and that's pressing on your nerves. So every time you move, it like sends like a shooting feeling down your nerves of your legs. But as soon as that it settles and it goes down, you won't have that feeling anymore. It's not going to be forever. And true to his word, after it took like 2 weeks, I'm not joking, 2 weeks of this pain, but it went away, and I was so grateful. I was just like, it was such a relief that this is not going to be permanent. And I have to say that all that torture that I went through was all from an epidural. So of course I rethought the whole thing, and baby number 8, I did not take an epidural. That was the outcome of the whole thing. But what I want you to know is that if you do end up taking an epidural and you get that headache, then probably for you the best idea is to take the blood patch, because then it makes the headache go away right away. Make sure that you lie down flat just like they told you. Don't move, for that half hour, 40 minutes when they tell you that you can't move. And in most likeliness, you will not get that shooting pain down your legs, the nerve issue. But if you do, it does go away. It does, and there is relief in the end. So you shouldn't feel, you shouldn't be so worried about it. Congratulations and good luck. I hope this video has been helpful.